Hi, this is Chris from needlepointers.com, and today I'd like to show you how to assemble this star block using traditional sewing methods and also using your Accuquilt Go. For the traditional sewing method, you'll need to cut 4 2.5-inch squares of the background fabric, 4 3-inch squares of both the background fabric and your star fabric, and 1 4.5-inch square of your star fabric. If you're using an Accuquilt Go cutter, you can make this block with any Go Qube. I'm using an 8-inch Go Qube, so my finished size block will be 8 inches. The dies you'll need from the Qube are the number 1, which is a larger square, the number 2, which is a smaller square, and the number 5, which is a half square triangle. If you'd like written instructions for creating this block, or you need information on how to cut with your Accuquilt Go cutter, please click the link in the description of this video to go to our webpage for this star block. On that page, I'll have a link to the demonstration of the Accuquilt Go cutter. With the number 1 die, cut 1 square in the star fabric. With the number 2 die, cut 4 corner squares in the background fabric. With the number 5 die, cut 8 half square triangles in both the star fabric and the background fabric. First, I will demonstrate the process of putting the star block together using the traditional cut pieces. After I finish putting it together traditionally, I will then have a whole process of putting the block together with the Accuquilt cut blocks. So if you're using Accuquilt, you can jump to that section of the video. First, we're going to create the half square triangles. Each of these blocks will create 2 half square triangles. As a first step, draw a line from corner to corner with a pencil. Do this on each of the blocks. We will be placing the 2 fabrics together and then sewing them with our 1/4-inch foot. If you don't have a 1/4-inch foot, you can simply mark 2 more lines and make them scant 1/4-inch lines, so make them just slightly less than a 1/4-inch. Mark the 2 lines on either side of the center line. So if you have a 1/4-inch foot, you'll use this line as your guide line and stitch a scant 1/4-inch seam on each side of the line. If you don't have the 1/4-inch foot, you can mark the 3 lines and then sew along each of the outside lines. After you mark the lines, place the fabrics right sides together, aligning all of the sides. Then we'll be ready to sew. I'm going to sew these together using a chain piece method, and that's where you sew off the edge of the first one, and then place the next one and just keep going. Chain piecing can save on thread, and also you have less trimming of thread ends. So I've sewn the first side, and now I'm going to sew the second side. And on this one I'm sewing on the outside line. I have this handy cutter that I can use to cut them apart very quickly. Next, use a rotary cutter and ruler to cut them apart at the center line. Iron these open, pressing the seam towards the darker fabric. Next, cut them down to be 2.5-inch squares. You can do this with a traditional ruler, but I like using this trim lock tool to cut them, and it is at exactly 2.5 inches. It has diagonal lines across. It has a gripper surface on the bottom. With this tool, you can line up the center line with the center seam on the half square triangle, and then cut, and you can turn this as you're cutting, and it stays in place underneath. So it makes cutting these half square triangles down to size much quicker. Next, we'll sew together the half square triangles to make the star points. Instead of half square triangles, we could have used a flying geese, but I find that the half square triangles are a lot easier to sew than a flying geese block. Once you have the whole block finished, the extra seam blends in. Set up your blocks so that they're like this, where there's a V, and the star fabric is on the outside corners. Put the 2 pieces together and sew along this middle seam. Then iron the seams to one side. There are my finished star point blocks. I ironed the seam to one side. Now I can show you how the pieces are for this block. So for the next step, we're going to sew the corner blocks onto the center one. Flip the corner blocks onto the center V on each side and sew a seam. Okay, so now I've sewn those together and I've pressed the seams towards the corner blocks. When we sew the rows together, we're going to be able to interlock the seams, which helps to keep your points nice and lined up. So next, I'm going to sew these two sides to the middle block. Flip the side over and I'll sew along this side. And then this one, we're going to iron the seams towards the center, and that will make our interlocking seams. Okay, our block is almost done. Here is the center piece, and you can see I have pressed this seam towards the center and these seams towards the outside. The last step is to sew the 3 rows together. So I will flip this down. And now the reason that we iron them the opposite direction, it makes this little ridge, and those ridges can really kind of lock together. And so when you sew the seam, it will keep them in place better. Now you can pin here too to hold them in place, but it will help them to not shift as you're sewing. So I'm going to sew the 3 strips together and I'll be back. And here's my finished traditionally pieced star block. These are the pieces that I cut with my Accuquilt cutter. First we'll create the half square triangle blocks. Here's the half square triangle, and I can flip the 2 pieces together. I can align the cut off corners and the long edge, which makes it easy to sew a scant 1/4 inch seam to sew the block together. Press them with the seam allowance going towards the darker fabric. With the Accuquilt cut blocks, you won't need to trim. Sew them together with a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. And using the chain piecing method makes it go much quicker. So here are my perfect little half square triangle blocks that I didn't have to trim. The rest of the steps for assembling this block are the same as for the traditional block. So for the next step, I'm going to sew these together in the center by flipping them together and then sewing down this seam. Iron them with all the seams to one side. Okay, so here are all the pieces for our star block. The next step is to sew the corners onto these side pieces along this side. Press these towards the corner fabric, and then when we press the center, we're going to press towards the center fabric, and then that will make it easier to sew the strips together because the seams will interlock. Okay, so I've sewn these together and I've pressed them towards the corner fabric. Next step is to flip these sides in and sew these to the middle block and then press the seam allowance to the middle. Okay, so the block is almost done. We just have to sew the 3 rows together. When I flip this over, because we ironed the seams in opposite directions, there's a ridge here on each side, and those 2 will lock together to help hold the seams in place when you sew them. And you can pin these seams to make sure they stay in place and don't shift while you're sewing. After I sew these seams on, press them towards the center. And the block is complete. You can see I've ironed the seams towards the center. This helps reduce the bulk because we have a lot of bulk in these points. I hope you enjoyed this video on how to make the star block using both traditional piecing and Accuquilt. Please like and share our videos. And if you're not a subscriber, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, X, and Pinterest. Visit our website, needlepointers.com, for lots of other free sewing and quilting videos and free projects. While you're there, make sure you sign up for our free newsletter so that you don't miss new tutorials. Happy sewing!